1940. London is on fire. Night after night, the German Luftwaffe rains death from a black sky. And on the ground, thousands of anti-aircraft guns fire back. They fire, and they miss. They fire again, and they miss again. They fire 10,000 times, and they miss. This is the dirty, terrifying secret of the early war. Anti-aircraft artillery was a joke. It wasn't a weapon, it was therapy. It was a noisemaker, a morale booster, to make the terrified citizens on the ground feel like someone was fighting back. But in reality, it was useless. Here's why. To hit an airplane, you have to solve an impossible 3D equation in seconds. You have to guess the target's exact speed, its exact direction, its exact altitude, and then you have to set a tiny mechanical clock, a fuse, in the nose of your shell to explode at the exact microsecond it reaches that exact point in the sky in the future. If your guess is wrong by half a second, your shell explodes in empty air. The pilots called it the 99% sky. How bad was it? In 1940, it took, on average, 20,000 anti-aircraft shells to hit one single plane. It was a fantasy, and because of it, London was burning. In the darkness of the Blitz, a small group of British scientists, desperate for a miracle, proposed an idea so insane, so far beyond 1940s technology, that it was pure science fiction. They didn't need a better gun, they needed a better bullet. They asked a question that would change the world. What if the shell could see? What if the shell had a brain? The idea was smuggled to America. It landed on the desk of one man, Vannevar Bush. Bush was the architect, the man Roosevelt had put in charge of all American science for the war. He knew this idea was the most important idea of the war, more important than radar, more important than jets, maybe more important than the atomic bomb. Because the bomb might end the war, but this could win it. He needed a genius, but not just a genius. He needed a leader, a man who could do the impossible yesterday. He didn't pick a military engineer. He picked a pure physicist, a man named Merle Tuve. Tuve was a lunatic, in the best possible way. He was a man who studied atoms. He studied the ionosphere. He had bounced radio waves off the moon. He was a theoretical scientist, not a weapons maker. Bush called Tuve to a secret meeting. He laid out the problem, and the problem was this. "Merle," Bush said, "I need you to build a complete radio station, a transmitter and a receiver. It has to be the size of your fist. It has to have its own power source. It has to be completely automatic. Oh, And one more thing. It has to survive 20,000 Gs. What is 20,000 Gs? It is the force of being fired from a cannon at 2,600 feet per second. It is an acceleration so violent that it's almost impossible to describe. Imagine taking your grandfather's radio and hitting it with a sledgehammer. Not once, 1,000 times, at the same time. Anything made of glass, like a vacuum tube, would not just break, it would disintegrate. It would turn to dust. Tuve, a man who loved the impossible, looked at Bush and said, "Okay, let's do it." His new project was given a code name, Section T, T for Tuve. It was set up at the Applied Physics Laboratory, APL, in Maryland. It was given unlimited money and a deadline of yesterday. And for most of World War II, Section T was the most secret project in the world. Its security clearance was higher than the Manhattan Project. The men and women who worked there were told, "If you are captured, die before you talk," because the secret was that big. Tuve's lab was a factory of failure. For 2 years they did nothing but fail. They were trying to solve 3 impossible problems at once. The brain of the radio was made of glass, and 20,000 Gs hated glass. How do you test it? You can't. So Tuve's engineers invented a way. They literally went to the parking lot, loaded the vacuum tubes into a 12-gauge shotgun, and fired them into a solid steel plate. If the tube survived that, it might survive a cannon. They failed hundreds of times. The solution? They didn't just buy tubes, they invented them. They worked with Sylvania to create ruggedized tubes, tubes the size of a peanut, tubes with no bases, tubes where the tiny internal wires were supported by steel rods. They were the first ruggedized electronics in history. The fuse needed power, but you couldn't preload the battery. The shells might sit in a hot jungle for years. The battery would be dead. So the battery had to turn itself on after it was fired. How? The solution was genius. Pure, simple, beautiful genius. Inside the fuse, they placed a tiny sealed glass ampule filled with electrolyte acid. Surrounding it were dry plates of lead and zinc. When the shell is fired, the 20,000 Gs smashes the glass ampule. The acid floods the zinc plates. The battery is instantly activated. It was a battery that was powered by the force that was trying to destroy it. The capacitors, the resistors, the wires, they were also turning to dust. The solution? They potted them. They took the entire delicate circuit and dunked it in molten wax or plastic resin. The wax would harden into a solid block. It became a shock absorber. The delicate parts were now floating, suspended, safe from the 20,000 Gs. And so, after 2 years and $150 million, they had it. A monster in a 5-inch shell. Here is the magic. The gun fires, the ampule breaks, the battery turns on. The fuse is now a tiny radio station. It starts transmitting a continuous, invisible radio wave 100 feet out. It's also a tiny radio receiver. It's listening for that wave to bounce back. This is the Doppler effect. As the shell gets closer to the plane, the echo gets stronger and stronger. When the echo reaches a preset level of strength, it throws a tiny electronic switch. Boom! The shell doesn't hit the target. It explodes beside the target. It unleashes a cloud of 3,000 high-velocity shrapnel fragments right in the face of the enemy plane. It was a shotgun blast in the sky that knew when to fire. It was a miracle. Now they just had to see if it worked. August 1943. The USS Cleveland. The Navy is skeptical. This Section T has burned through billions with no results. The admirals, they think Tuve is a con man. On the deck is Admiral King, the CNO, the boss. He is not impressed. "All right, Dr. Tuve," he says, "show us your magic trick." The test is simple. They launch a series of target drones. First, the old way, the ship's 5-inch guns, using the old mechanical timer fuses. The gunners are the best in the Navy. They fire hundreds of rounds. They don't hit anything. They are proving Tuve's point. Admiral King is turning red. "All right," he barks. "Load the new ones." Tuve is sweating. They have 5 magic shells. A new drone is launched. Fire 1. The first shell obliterates the drone. There is a stunned silence on the bridge. The gunners are just staring. "Launch the second drone! Launch the third drone!" Merle Tuve is about to cry. It worked! But Admiral King is furious. He turns to Tuve. His face is purple, and he screams, "This is a trick! You are faking this!" He was so convinced that hitting a plane was impossible that he truly believed that Tuve had planted explosives on the drones and was faking the results with a radio controller to steal $1 billion from the Navy. It took 2 hours for the scientists to prove to the Admiral that it was real. When he finally understood, he just sat down. An officer next to him whispered, "My God, it's a magic fuse." The name stuck, and the magic fuse was about to win the war. June 1944. A new terror. The V1, the buzz bomb, Hitler's vengeance weapon. It wasn't a plane. It was a cruise missile. It was small. It flew at 400 miles per hour, low, and it never missed. The British Spitfires were barely fast enough to catch it. And the AA guns? The old AA guns were useless. It took 2,500 shells to hit one V1. London was being terrorized again. The commander of Britain's anti-aircraft, General Pyle, was desperate. He was given the magic fuse. He made a brilliant decision. He stripped London of its guns. He moved every single gun to the coast, to the white cliffs of Dover. He was building a wall of magic fuses. The V1 would have to fly through it. The results were staggering. Watch the kill rate. The first week, with the VT fuse, the guns shot down 24% of the V1s. The second week, as the crews got better, the kill rate rose to 46%. The third week, 67%. The fourth week, as every gun was firing the magic fuse, the kill rate was 80%. It was a slaughter. The V1 attack was broken. The magic fuse was shredding the buzz bombs before they even crossed the English Channel. London was saved. Merle Tuve, a physicist, had personally defeated Hitler's superweapon. But in the Pacific, a new, even worse, terror, the Kamikaze, the divine wind. This was a weapon that could not be stopped because it wanted to die. You didn't have to hit it. You had to obliterate it. A hit plane, a damaged plane, still hit the ship. The old fuses were useless. The Navy was panicked. The fleet was defenseless. And then the magic fuse arrived, and it was the perfect weapon. It didn't need to make a lucky hit. It didn't care about the pilot's divine wind. It just sensed the plane and exploded. It allowed the United States Navy to create a wall of steel, a barrier of exploding shrapnel that no plane could fly through and survive. The Kamikaze was not defeated by pilots. It was defeated by a radio wave invented by Merle Tuve. But the fuse's greatest and most secret victory was on land. December 1945, Hitler's last desperate gamble, the Battle of the Bulge. A massive German attack has broken the American lines. The American GIs are in foxholes, in the frozen snow, and they are outnumbered. They are being overrun. Until now, the magic fuse was so secret it was forbidden from being used on land. Why? Because the generals were terrified that one unexploded shell would be found by the Germans, and the secret would be lost. But now, General Patton is desperate. He gets the authorization. Use them. But they don't use them on the tanks. They use them on the infantry. The German soldiers are advancing, hiding in the foxholes and behind trees. Traditional artillery, which explodes on impact, is useless. It just makes holes in the mud. But the magic fuse doesn't need to hit the mud.
The Americans aimed their shells over the heads of the Germans. The fuse with its tiny radio saw the ground. It sensed the trees, and it exploded 60 feet in the air. It was called airburst. For the German soldiers, it was the apocalypse. It was steel rain. Shrapnel and death rained down on them from above. The foxholes were useless. The trees were useless. There was nowhere to hide. The German attack was broken. The soldiers were shredded. The survivors were terrified. They thought America had a new, terrifying superweapon. They were right. General Patton himself called it the weapon that won the Battle of the Bulge.
The magic fuse was the hero of 1944. It was the weapon that won the war in every theater. It saved London. It saved the U.S. Navy. It saved the GIs at the Battle of the Bulge. The project cost $1 billion in 1940s money. It was more expensive than the entire first half of the Manhattan Project. 80,000 Americans worked on it in total secrecy. It was a triumph, and nobody has ever heard of it. Why? Why did one secret weapon become the symbol of the war, while the other disappeared? The secrecy was too good. The VT fuse was so secret that it wasn't fully declassified until the 1960s. The men who built it went to their graves without telling their wives what they did. The atom bomb was louder. The atomic bomb was cinematic. It was terrifying. It ended the war in a single blinding flash. It was the exclamation point. The magic fuse was the sentence. It was the slow, grinding work that got them to the end. It wasn't sexy. It was boring. An atomic bomb is a bomb. A B-29 is a plane. A fuse is a component. It's a part. It is technical. And it's hard to tell a story about a component. But this is the truth. The atomic bomb ended World War II. But the proximity fuse is the weapon that won World War II. Without it, London would have been destroyed. Without it, the U.S. Navy would have been sunk by the Kamikaze. Without it, the Battle of the Bulge could have been lost. The secret of the war wasn't a bomb. It was a brain. A brain the size of a fist that could survive 20,000 Gs. Invented by a man you've never heard of, Merle Tuve, the lunatic physicist who saved the world.